Welcome to the Marriage Steps podcast. We're developing a long-lasting, happy relationship is the status symbol to achieve. And following my 6 marriage steps is a path to help get you there. The 6 steps are establishing a covenant foundation, owning your brokenness, learning to share power, developing emotional attachment, cultivating sexual fireworks, and staying in love. I'm your host, Dr. Wyatt Fisher, licensed psychologist and marriage counselor. If you believe in this podcast and would like to help me keep it on the air, please consider becoming a monthly supporter by going to patreon.com/marriage steps. That's patreon.com/marriage steps. Depending on your level of support, you'll receive a public thank you, a free marriage training module of your choice, or 2 free tickets to my next Total Marriage Refresh seminar. Today I'm going to focus on 5 reasons not to have intercourse until after your wife orgasms. So this is a big topic, sex and marriage, and there's a lot of thoughts and feelings and perspectives around sex and marriage. And usually before a couple gets married, all they want to do is have sex, and especially right after they get married. And then before too long, couples can struggle even having sex at all. So sex is a loaded topic for a lot of couples. Some couples, it's their natural strength, and they've always had a great sex life, and they can lean on that. But that's more rare. The majority of couples have issues around sexual intimacy for one reason or another. Most of the reason is from a difference in libido. That can be a common occurrence, or previous sexual trauma. That can be another factor that can make sexual intimacy a problem in marriage. So today I'm going to go through 5 reasons not to have intercourse until after she orgasms. Here's the first reason. For the majority of women, pleasure goes down after intercourse begins because intercourse does not provide enough clitoral stimulation for the female. So once intercourse begins, the woman's experience with pleasure tends to go downhill. It's rare for a woman to orgasm through intercourse, and that is the reason, because there's not enough clitoral stimulation. So that's one reason to postpone intercourse until after your wife orgasms, because most likely she's not going to during intercourse because there's not enough clitoral stimulation. The second reason to not have intercourse until after she orgasms is it ensures that the wife has a positive association with sex. What happens in a lot of marriages is the man has the higher libido and he approaches his wife, and before long he goes right to intercourse because that's what feels best to him, and the wife does not orgasm. Or maybe it's once in a while she orgasms, but it's definitely not probably as often as the man orgasms. And that creates an association for the woman with sex. An association of, this really isn't that enjoyable. This is really just for my husband. I really don't want to be here. I'm just going through the motions. Now it's obligation sex. And everyone loses when it turns into obligation sex. And most women who are under this obligation sex feeling, that decreases libido even further down. So you want your wife to develop a positive association with sex. And one way to do that is you ensure that she orgasms most of the time. And one way to ensure that happens is you want to prioritize her orgasm before intercourse ever occurs. If you've ever taken a general psychology course, maybe you remember Pavlov and his dog. He would feed the dog and ring a bell. And then eventually the dog would pair and associate the bell with food. And so the dog would start to salivate when it would eat and ring in and hearing that bell. And before long, Pavlov could ring the bell and not provide any food, and the dog would start to salivate because the dog associated the bell with food, and so the dog would salivate. So this applies in marriage. You want your wife to associate sex with pleasure and with positivity and enjoyment. And so one way to help her have that positive association is to prioritize her orgasm before intercourse begins. A third reason not to have intercourse until after she orgasms is because women can orgasm multiple times. One way to think about a woman's sexuality is like an iron. It takes a while for a woman to heat up sexually, but once she's hot, she stays hot for a while, and it takes a while for her to cool off. And because of that, a woman biologically has the capability to orgasm multiple times. So just because she orgasmed before intercourse doesn't mean she won't orgasm again. She very well could. So that's another reason to prioritize the orgasm before intercourse, because it's different. For men, after they orgasm, they want to take a nap. They just crash, and they have to wait a long period of time usually before they're able to have intercourse again, or before they even have any desire to be erotic or sexual. But women aren't wired that way. Once they get hot and once they orgasm, they stay hot for a while, and they can have multiple orgasms. A fourth reason not to have intercourse until after she orgasms is it counters, men, I'm talking to you with high libidos out there, it counters your selfish bent in the bedroom. Most men have high libidos, not all, but for those who do, it's very easy to be selfish in the bedroom because intercourse tends to feel the best to most men, and so therefore, that's what they're after. They're after the intercourse. So as fast as they can get to intercourse, the faster they can get there, the better. And so men tend to skip the small stuff, and they tend to skip the foreplay, and they tend to skip the gentle caresses because they want to get straight to intercourse. And that's really a selfish approach to sex because it's not considering how your wife is wired, what would feel best to her, and it does not prioritize her pleasure. It's prioritizing your own. And so to consider this approach of we're not going to have intercourse until after my wife orgasms, that creates selflessness. That makes you prioritize her experience first, her body first, her pleasure first. And once that's prioritized and she orgasms, then you get pleasure second, because then you can enjoy intercourse together. So it counters your selfish bent. It requires this stretching to make you more selfless, to have her orgasm before intercourse begins. A fifth reason not to have intercourse until after she orgasms, men, is it requires you to learn about your woman's body, your wife's body. Because our sex drive can be so strong, a lot of times we don't slow down. We don't care to really understand how she works sexually. And so a lot of men don't know how to touch their wife, how to slowly stroke their wife, how to gradually turn on their wife, how to pleasure their wife's vulva. I've talked about this in other episodes. The vulva has 5 hot spots. You have the clitoral shaft, the clitoral head, the frenulum, the perineum, and the clitoral cluster. So those are 5 hot spots most men have no idea about. And so it requires you to slow down and understand how your wife is wired, how her body is wired, what turns her on, everything around the vulva, and what pleasures those areas around the vulva. If you are prioritizing her orgasm first, that's going to require you to slow down and turn into a student on your wife's body. And she is going to appreciate that. She's going to come alive. Most men want to feel sexually desired. And one of the best ways you can do that, men, is to learn how to turn on your wife's body. But that requires you to slow down and put your needs second by prioritizing her orgasm first and foremost before you go into intercourse. So those are 5 reasons not to have intercourse until after she orgasms. Number 1, the pleasure goes down for her after intercourse begins. Number 2, it ensures your wife has a positive association with sexual encounters. Number 3, women can orgasm multiple times because when they heat up, they stay hot. 4, it counters your selfish bent in the bedroom. And 5, it requires you to learn about her body because it makes you slow down. Thank you for listening to the Marriage Steps podcast. If you enjoyed the episode today, please subscribe, click the 5 stars, and leave a review. For more marriage resources, go to my website, drwyattfisher.com. That's drwyattfisher.com. And follow me at facebook.com/Dr. Wyatt Fisher or on Instagram at Dr. Wyatt Fisher. Also, if this podcast has made a positive impact on your relationship, I would love to hear from you at info@drwyattfisher.com. And remember, your marriage is alive. If you care for it, it will thrive. And if you don't, it will die. The choice is up to you. Take care.